Ladies and gentlemen, sitting across from me today, or should I say on the other side of the screen, we arguably have one of the best centre-backs in the A-League right now. She's had a standout season with Sydney FC, played professionally in Australia, Israel and back home in the States. A former Division 1 soccer player at Gonzaga, and just an all-round superstar. Jordan Thompson, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All good. Well, thank you very much for joining us. So I think, look, today you are the first ever guest on our inaugural SCA podcast. So thank you very much for that. I think for us, we just really want to highlight your story. We want to give Australian kids a bit of an insight into what it's like, sort of playing youth football in America. Growing up, talk a bit about your recruitment process, what that looked like, your time at Gonzaga, and then switch and put our professional hats on and talk a little bit about your pro career. So let's jump in.
Perfect.
So we'll rewind the clock. Give us a bit of an insight into life growing up in Washington. Give us a bit of an insight as what it was like, playing football at youth club level, high school, just general life.
Yeah, so I don't really come from a soccer family. My sisters played a little bit. I have two older sisters that I am 4 years apart from each of them. So they played a little bit growing up, but didn't play super competitively. So I joined, I'm not really sure what you guys call it here, but we kind of have Pee Wee, which is where you start when you're 5, 6, 7 years old. Then you go into youth soccer, which is not super competitive, but it's a little bit higher than Pee Wee. And then you have club, which is like the highest level at the time when I was playing that you could get to. And then you also have high school, but that kind of feeds into your club season in a way. So started at Pee Wee when I was 5. There was a team that was a couple-minute walk from my house, and a few of my friends from school played. So told my mom I wanted to play. She signed me up. I played, it's also called Pee Wee Rec Soccer. So I played rec soccer until I was 10, and then when I was 10 I was much bigger and stronger and faster than all the kids, so I was kind of just wrecking people, like just bulldozing them, and my mom was like, I don't know, like you seem like you should not be playing at this level anymore because you're gonna hurt someone. But because we weren't a soccer family, we didn't really know what the next level was, so she ended up seeing an advertisement, I think, either through an email or maybe at the store, like on the side of the road or something, that was tryouts for Washington Premier. Had no idea what it was. And she was like, hey, I found this club. Do you want to go try out for it? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Why not? I showed up to training or to tryouts in a pair of basketball shorts, a pair of neon green knee-high socks, like not soccer socks, just knee-high socks, and a camo sweatshirt from Cabela's, which is this like outdoor hunting and fishing store. I had no business. Oh my gosh. It was so, I cracked up. One of my friends actually told me a few years later, she was like, I hope you know, like, you're the reason I had the confidence to try out, because I was really nervous sitting in the back seat and I saw you walk in front of my car, and I told my mom, if she's here to try out, then I can try out too, because I just looked so out of place. So I was going to try out with all these people who had basically played club soccer since they were like 6, 7, 8, and I was coming in with not a lot of experience. I literally made the team because I was fast. The coach called, and after a couple of days of tryouts, and was like, yeah, she's not the best at soccer, but she's fast, so we can teach her how to play soccer. And then that's kind of where my club career started. We played.
How old were you then? You were about 10, did you say?
I was 10, so it was 4th grade, I think, 10 going on 11. We trained 3 days a week, played 1 or 2 games on the weekend, just depending on season. During summer is like tournament season, so you're playing multiple games a weekend. And then outside of summer is you're more like 1 game a week, sometimes a Friday, Sunday game. Yep. And so up until U13, you just play, it's just called like PDL, or I think it was, I don't even remember what it was called when I was playing, something like PDL, that's just club. There's not really like a hierarchy, but there was an A team and a B team. So A team was like the better of the players, and then the B team was kind of like the second string in a way. It's kind of hard to divvy that up when you're 10 and 11 though. But
yeah, for sure.
Once we hit U13, this new part of the club had come in called ECNL, which is the Elite Clubs National League. And that was basically all of the top players, all the top clubs in the country, and the top players in each of those clubs made up the age groups. So we fed into ECNL, and that started U13 and then went until U18. And that was when you would go, you'd have your normal ECNL games, but then you'd also have ECNL showcases that you would go to on weekends. Sometimes they were in California, sometimes they were in Washington. Then you had regionals and nationals you played for. Sometimes they were in Texas, sometimes they were in Florida. And that was where you got a lot of your exposure for college. And then, that was kind of the youth scene. We now have what's called the Development Academy, which we didn't have that. That came a year after I graduated. So ECNL is still a big thing, but I'm not sure if it's as popular as Development Academy now. But that's what my kind of youth club looked like.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Do you know much about like the NPL system here? I know you obviously only been in Australia a short period of time, but do you know much about like the youth space here in Australia?
I'm learning more about it. I know a lot of girls from the A-League will play NPL in the off season. I'm not sure if that's the same as the NPL youth, but that's about all I know about it. I don't know much else.
So I think just from your experience and just, revisiting what you've just said, I think ECNL is probably very similar to NPL youth here, right? Like it's similar format, U13 through to U18s, and then obviously it feeds into like a senior program as well. So you've got under 20s, reserve grade, first grade, obviously different on men's v women's. So I think it sounds a little bit like your ECNL would be the equivalent of NPL youth in this country. Okay. Would that be fair in saying?
Yeah, sounds like it.
For sure. So obviously, you putting yourself back in your shoes, you've gone through your ECNL career, you've done your showcases, things like that. You're starting to get recognised by coaches. What does that then look like for your recruitment process? Like, when did coaches start speaking to you? How many coaches spoke to you? How many people were coming to watch your showcase games at ECNL level, etc.?
Yeah, I think the rules were a little bit different when I was going through it. So there weren't any strict guidelines or strict rules on when college coaches could talk to you. So people in my class, I remember there were some girls that were committing in like 8th grade, 9th grade. Wow. And by committing, meaning you're committing to you're verbally committing to play at a college. So you can't sign your letter of intent until you're a senior, but you can verbally commit. It was really young. And then it was really interesting though, because the only hard, fast rule was that you couldn't have direct contact with the college coach until you were, I think it was going into your junior year. But there were ways around it where I could call and leave a message and be like, hey, I'm going to call tomorrow at 4 p.m. I really hope you're available for a chat. And they would get that message. They would know that the message was coming. And then I could call them and be like, hey, how's it going? So random that you picked up. Or things were done through your club coach, where a college would reach out to your club coach would forward the email to you. You would respond to the college, but you were responding through your club coach. So let's say you emailed me, you'd send it to, we'll use my mom for an example. You'd send it to my mom, who's my club coach. My mom's like, hey, Jordan, here's the message from Dylan. And then I'd be like, hi, Dylan, thanks so much. Or like, hey, mom, can you send this message to Dylan? And then it would be a complete response to you. So there were kind of ways around it where that's not necessarily the case anymore. I don't think you can have any contact at all with college coaches until you're in your junior year, which I think is year 11 here. Yeah. So, I started emailing, kind of similar again with the club situation. I had no idea how to go about the recruitment process. My family had never gone through it before, but we learned from some of my friends that to send out emails. And so my mom actually helped me send out a lot of emails. And before every showcase, I would draft up these emails. I would make a list of all the schools that I wanted to send stuff to, and I'd send them a little personalized note just saying who I am, what club I played for, why I liked their school and their program, and then would send them my schedule for the weekend. And I want to say people definitely were coming to games when we were like 14, 15, and then by the time you were 16, 17, there were some games that we probably had 100 college coaches sitting on the sideline just watching. Yeah, so it's actually a really cool experience. You kind of rock up to your game and there's coaches and just filled on the sideline. They have their little chairs, they have their notebook, they have the hat on, and they have their backpack. And so that they're going to be there. They don't spend the whole time at your game. Sometimes they spend 5 minutes, sometimes they spend 20. So it is really interesting that you kind of have to get lucky in the sense that you just happen to have a really good game or a really good 10-minute period when they're watching. And if they like you in that 10 minutes, then they likely will come back to another game, and you just kind of keep emailing them being like, hey, I saw you were at my game. Thanks so much for coming. If you want to come in the future, here's a list of some more of my games. Yeah, so it was a lot of reaching out, but also just good timing in that case. Because then you have situations where maybe you didn't have a good 10 minutes and the coach was like, never mind, don't want to watch you. And at that time too, I think highlight videos and Instagrams and Twitters, or like X's, whatever they're called now, have become, and TikToks have become a lot more popular. So you have kind of more of an avenue to showcase yourself, where that wasn't necessarily the case when I was going through it. We had highlight videos, but they weren't as common to use to show your skill.
Interesting. So let's say, just rewinding a little bit here, you're at a game, there's 100 odd coaches, they're coming in and out of the game. So then you would then go back and email them and say, hey, thanks for coming. But they're still technically not allowed to talk to you at this stage. Is that correct? Yeah.
So you just shoot them an email and just hope that they saw it. And that's kind of why you wanted to put the little blurb about why you liked their school and who you were, so that it wasn't just a generic email, so that it actually stood out to them when they were reading it and they would potentially remember you. And that's why calling was important too. So a lot of times I would send an email, and in my email I'd be like, I'm going to call tomorrow at 4 p.m. And then I would call them the next day at 4, whether they answered or not. Then I would leave a message being like, hey, I'm Jordan. I sent you an email. Just wanted to touch base and let you know that I sent you my schedule. I really hope to see you this weekend. Thanks so much. Hang up the phone.
I'll tell you what, it must have been a bit of an emotional roller coaster, right? Like at that age, sending those emails, going to all that effort, telling people you're going to call them and not knowing whether or not they're going to pick up. I actually rate it. I think it's, it teaches you a lot at that age in, how to, communicate with people, how to be respectful, scripting those sorts of emails. It's in my opinion, a really good learning curve.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot. It was a lot of work too. I remember my mom and I would spend hours getting ready for showcases doing this, and it teaches you how to kind of have more mature conversations, because you can't just call a coach and be like, sup coach, how's it going? I'd love to come to your school. You have to really think about how you want to present yourself and how you want them to respond to you as well. Because if you don't send a great email, or if you're not paying extra attention and you are copying pasting email, maybe you forget to change the name of the school or change the name of the coach, then it's like, ooh. So it kind of teaches you to pay a lot of attention to detail as well, and be thoughtful with how you're interacting with people.
Yeah, I remember when I transferred, I started doing the process myself. So a similar sort of experience in emailing coaches and things like that. And I remember I used to just do the old copy and paste blanket message and just change the coach's name, change the school. The amount of times I must have just accidentally sent the wrong email to the wrong person. I was like, well, probably never going to hear back from that guy ever again.
There goes that opportunity.
Yeah. So come senior year, or maybe even junior year, how many options did you have before you committed to Gonzaga?
Yeah, I actually have a really unique recruiting experience. I didn't have a ton of offers. Gonzaga was the only offer I had. I did commit really early. I committed summer going into my junior year. I kind of knew going into it that I didn't want to go to a big school, because I don't know how classes are here, but in uni in America, if you go to a big school, your homeroom, so your 101, you're just really entry-level classes that you take your freshman year will be anywhere from 300 to 500 people, which is insane. And I knew I was not going to be successful in that environment. And so I wanted a bit of a smaller school. Gonzaga is actually a funny story. My mom went to law school there, and it was the one school I did not want to go to. I was like, I am not going to this school. I do not want to talk to them. And I straight up told my mom, I was like, if you want me to go to this school, you have to send the email. Because she made me send all my own emails. She would help me, but she was like, this is your recruiting process. You want to go to college to play soccer, you have to do the work. And I'd be like, oh, I don't want to do it. But Gonzaga was the one school She told me to email them, and I was like, nope. And I was like, I'm not doing it. And if you want me to go there, if you want me to email them, you have to email them. So she wrote my email for me. Thank God she did. But yeah, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with Gonzaga. But then they reached out my sophomore year and invited me on campus for an unofficial visit. And I stayed with one of the girls who was on the team at the time, who actually like became one of my best friends and is one of my best friends to this day. She took me around campus. I stayed the night in her dorm. And after visiting the school, it just felt really homey. I feel like you hear that a lot, and I'm sure you had a similar experience. You step on campus and it feels like home. And once that happened, I wasn't super interested in other schools at that point. And I do think as well, because the recruiting process started so early, I was really anxious about being committed, because a lot of girls on my team had committed, a lot of people around me had committed, from other clubs in the state and also from states or other clubs outside of the state. So I was like, I like Gonzaga. I just want to be done. Let's move on. So yeah, Gonzaga was actually my only offer, and I just went with it, and it worked out.
Wow.
I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend waiting to see what your options are. But yeah, that was my experience.
But in my mind, like, Gonzaga's a pretty good Division 1 program. Would I be wrong in saying that?
No, definitely not. They weren't the greatest when I was going. I think the year before I went, they were like 4-12 or something like that.
Okay.
But now they actually just won the WCC with the West Coast Conference championship last year. So they've it's a really good school now. It's a top 25 school for women's soccer, which is really cool, because when I came in, it wasn't. And then by the time I left, we were also a top 25 school, hadn't won a championship or anything, but we were in contention for the NCAA tournament and stuff like that. So it's a great school, and it's also really good for academics.
All down to your exploits, huh? Let's talk a bit about your freshman year, because when I was doing some research on you, this one struck me. A lot of people think there's a bit of a stigma around freshmen don't play, right? And there's probably a number of freshmen on your team that maybe didn't play, right? You were an exception to this rule. In your freshman year, you had the highest number of minutes across the squad, which is pretty phenomenal, and you were in the all West Coast freshman team as well. Now, for people back here, the Americans love their accolades. Would you agree with me
Yes.
on this one, Jordan? Yes.
They're a really big deal.
Yes. So they're all about first team, second team, freshman teams. Any sort of honours that you can get just look great on the CV, right? And you got a lot of them, especially, starting with your freshman year like that. What was that like?
Yeah, so again, I feel like my whole soccer experience has been super unique. I graduated high school a semester early, actually, and so I left January of my senior year of high school and enrolled in Gonzaga for the spring semester of that year. And for people that aren't familiar, your spring semester, you don't play counting games. So you have 4 or 5 games that you play, but they don't count for anything. So they're basically just training games. So I think that was a huge part of why I was able to come in my true freshman year and be able to start, is I kind of had 4 or 5 months under my belt, learning what the coaches wanted, learning what the team wanted, getting my feet underneath me. But even then, I still coming in, it's such a step up. It's so much faster, the speed of play. The girls are faster, they're stronger, they're smarter. Mm-hmm. You're 18 playing with 24-year-olds, which is nuts. Yeah. 23-year-olds. And in high school, obviously there's a little bit of an age difference. If you make varsity as a freshman, you're maybe 14 playing with an 18-year-old. But in club, all the games you're playing, everybody's in the same level, essentially. So that was a huge learning curve. And yeah, freshman year, I definitely learned a ton and made so many mistakes.
Oh, really?
But it was, oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I had no experience. I just had the experience of coming in from spring and had a few of the spring games under my belt. But playing a spring game is so different than playing a counting game that matters for conference and where you land. But I feel like the girls were just super encouraging, and the coaches were super encouraging and helped me develop every day.
I love that. So yeah. You must have had a good relationship with your coach, right? Going in, because playing the amount of minutes you did, and you've just said you made a lot of mistakes, what was that relationship like with him? Because he must have seen something in you and trusted you to keep putting you out there week after week.
Yeah, he's awesome. I really, really like him, and even to this day, I still chat with him, still call him up if I have any questions about soccer and thoughts. And his first day was actually my first day. So the coaching staff that recruited me, just was like the perfect storm. The coaching staff that recruited me got let go because they didn't have a couple successful seasons in a row. And like I said, I came in at semester, started the first day of the semester, and that was his first day as well, and the two new assistants' first day. So we kind of came in together being like, hey, we're both new here. What are we going to do? And he actually made a visit to my house after he was hired. He came over for a visit, and I had told him that I wanted to enroll for spring, and he was super excited about that. And that was kind of where we started those conversations of just like, we're in this together. We're going to both be brand new people on the team. And so I think that was kind of where that relationship started. That was probably a little bit more unique. And I think also coming into college and not having any previous assumptions or understanding of how the game worked or what was expected of me. I just knew I had to go in and work really hard. And I had no idea what the social norms were or the cultural norms were. And I think that in a way benefited me as well, is because my social norms and cultural norms just became what he wanted and what his vision was, as opposed to a lot of the other girls were coming from social and cultural norms that had happened and been developed under the previous coach.
Right, okay. Interesting. So you mentioned you started in January, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk us through a little bit of that, because we've had some kids that have started in January. Obviously, it's sometimes it's tough to go in January, but obviously just because with soccer being a fall sport, it's you go to university and over 2 semesters you will graduate, at the end of spring. So you've basically got an extra semester where most of the time players aren't playing, right? So there's usually not a whole lot of scholarship money available. I'm a big fan of going in January, acclimatizing yourself, getting used to the squad, etc. Do you think that helped your college career by starting in January?
Definitely. It gave me an extra 4 or 5 months, like I said, to adapt to the team, to get to know the team, to instead of coming in as a freshman where you're learning in preseason and you're making mistakes in preseason where like 2 weeks later you're going into counting games. I had those 4 or 5 months to make those mistakes and to learn. And then coming into preseason, I already knew what was expected of me and what was expected of the team and kind of how, like what was important and what our values were and what our culture was. And I think school-wise, it also helped. I was able to take a lot of my harder classes in spring. I went into college as a science major, so I was able to take a lot of my lab and science classes in spring, which let me have a lighter load in the fall. And then eventually over my term, like my senior year, I only had class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it like let me kind of spread out the credits that I had to take so that I could have lighter falls every single year so that I wasn't as stressed out with school and traveling. Yeah,
makes sense. And you can focus more on your football that way as well.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Let's fast forward a little bit, just because I'm conscious of time. Let's move to your 5th and final year, senior year. Now you were part of the COVID pandemic during college, right? Which really shook up everything. For those of you that don't know, all student athletes that were at college during this time got an extra year of eligibility. So Jordan got to play 5 years of college soccer. And again, we'll go through some of the accolades because we know that everyone loves to talk about the accolades, and you had some fantastic accolades in your 5th and final senior year. You were WCC first team, so that basically, for those who don't know, that's your conference first team. Started all 20 games, even bagged 3 goals from centre back, which is, not bad. Finished your career with 81 starts, 7,195 minutes, and probably the most important one of all of this, you were the first Zag to ever be drafted. Did I say that correctly? Zag or?
Yeah, it's a Zag. Good job.
Make sure I got the lingo down, Pat.
Yeah, 5th year was interesting. It was really fun. I wasn't expecting to get a fifth year, even though our season was canceled. We had still played a spring season. So instead of it being in fall during COVID, it got shifted to the spring. It was a condensed season though. So all of us were like, okay, like we're not going to get an extra year because we still technically had our season. And then I think it was like halfway through my senior year, my coaches were like, you know, you get another season, right? And I was like, haha, that's funny. And they're like, no, we're serious. You get another season. And I was like,
oh, coming back for another year.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, that's crazy. And I actually like hadn't considered staying for a fifth year. I had kind of wanted to play pro, but because of COVID, NWSL was essentially shut down. Going abroad wasn't an option because the borders were shut down everywhere.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like,
you couldn't have played in Australia at that time.
Yeah, there was nowhere to go. So at that point I was kind of like, well, okay, it was a good run. This was fun. Would have been awesome if I could have played, but no biggie. So I actually applied to law school and had been planning on going to law school when my coaches told me that we got a fifth year. And I was like, oh, well, okay. So I remember talking to my parents and being like, hey, what do you guys think? Do I go to law school? Do I take my fifth year? And they were like, law school will be there forever, but your fifth year won't. This is your one chance you have to play again.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, fair enough. I'll do my fifth year. And then, about halfway through my fifth year, I was like, okay, no, I really want to play. Obviously, things had started to open up again. The draft was back. NWSL was back on a normal schedule. Abroad options, the borders were open again. Then it was just decided to enter the draft. And I got an agent at the end of season, which was super helpful. I didn't have many expectations for the draft. I was excited about it, but Gonzaga is a small school. We hadn't made the tournament. I think I had actually made honorable mention my fifth year, not first team. So I think I remember having accolades, but not like ones that stood out a ton. Like I wasn't defender of the year or anything. So I was kind of like, all right, we'll see what happens. And then ended up getting drafted, which was crazy. And then
What was that like getting drafted? Because it's a novelty to us here in Australia, right? We don't do anything like that. And I know in America, you've got drafts for basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse, rugby now. You probably didn't even know that. But, it's a mad old process, and I was at the convention in January when the draft was on. They wouldn't actually let us in when the draft was on. I think it was only agents and players and families and stuff like that. So I would have liked to been a part of that process. But give us your just insight into the build up to it, what happens on the day, because it looks like an absolute emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, so the draft that year was still online, or it was like you had to watch it on TV. They didn't have it. They were going to have it in person, and then it was supposed to be in LA County, but LA County was still pretty strict on their COVID restrictions. So I think maybe like a week or two before, they were like, just kidding, we're not going to have it. You basically, after season, you are given this form. You go onto their website, you're given a form, you fill the form out with all of your information, your accolades, what your season was like, if you have national team experience, and then you submit a highlight video. And then that's pretty much it. If you have an agent, then your agent starts reaching out to people. So my agent was reaching out to people, sending my highlight video to coaches, having those conversations. And I'm not sure what other people's experiences are, but I didn't have any conversations with any coaches beforehand. Morning, leading into the draft, my agent was like, don't get your hopes up. We'll see. Hopefully something pops up. Morning of the draft, he had texted me and said, keep your eye on Washington Spirit today. But they only had 2 picks. So there's 50 picks in the draft that year. They only had 2 picks. So I was like, okay, I'll keep my eye on them, but it's just 2, so it's not a big deal. I didn't want to have a big draft party because I wasn't sure if I was going to get drafted. So I just had my family over, my partner, and then one of my best friends, and we just had the draft on. I was the last pick of the draft, so I ended up I watched the draft for 4 hours, waiting and waiting and waiting. And some of the videos, they had live reactions of some of the girls. And some of the girls, you could tell they knew that they were getting drafted because they were sitting with their phones, recording it, ready. And then some of the girls that got drafted almost fell out of their chair. They were so shocked. So I remember texting my agent and being like, hey, am I going to hear from somebody if I'm going to get drafted? Will they call me? Will they text me? And he was like, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I had my phone on ring the whole day, and I was so anxious. But as we kind of got closer and closer to the end of the draft, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put the phone away. It's not a big deal. And then I think like the 47th pick, I got an Instagram notification that Washington Spirit followed me. And I almost threw up. Literally, I was like, you guys, Washington Spirit followed me. And I click on it. They unfollowed me. Notification's gone.
No.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, maybe it was an accident. Like, must not have meant to do it. They like, I know they have the last pick, but crap. And so my mom was like, hey, don't worry. It's okay. Like, maybe they're going to draft you, but maybe they're just going to invite you because you can, if you don't get drafted, I think there's like a 24, 48 hour period where teams can invite you into their preseason camp. So she's like, maybe they're looking for you for that. And I was like, okay, you're right. So then 49th pick goes, I get a text from my agent as they're announcing the 49th pick that's like, get ready for a phone call. And I'm like, holy crap. So then at this point, my heart's like in my stomach. The draft, they go, okay, Washington Spirit, you're on the clock. As soon as the clock hits 1 second, my phone rings. And I pick it up and I'm like, hello. And they say like, hey, this is the head coach from Washington Spirit. How are you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. How are you? He's like, we just want to let you know, like, you're going to be our 50th pick. We're going to call your name next. So we're super excited. Really enjoy the moment. We'll get in touch with you in the next couple days. But have a great night. And I was like, I don't even remember what I said. I think I blacked out. And I'm like, my mom has a video. I'm just like pacing back and forth in the kitchen, and I hang up the phone and I'm like, they're going to call my name. And so, yeah, then sat down, obviously knew it was coming. So I didn't record. I just kind of sat there like this, and my family was recording, and then they called my name, and that was that. And then, yeah, it was great. It was so crazy. It was just like such a roller coaster of emotions. And then I was so happy to finally be done. Cause like you said, it was a 4-hour ordeal. And I was like, oh, thank goodness this day is over. But it was an unreal feeling. It's like probably has to be like top 3 feelings ever. And just like such a cool experience.
Tell you what, you got my heart racing here. Story from start to finish. When they start following you and following you on your Insta, I was like,
that was crazy.
Stressful.
I was so stressed. I was like, oh no, they don't want me. But yeah, that was pretty funny.
Did your agent have like a backup plan? Like, was he like, look, if draft doesn't work, I've got options for you overseas and stuff like that? Because in my eyes, like, you know, the NWSL, and credit to the European pathway now, Europe's blowing up within the women's space, but it's right up there, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, the NWSL is a big league, you know, in terms of women's soccer. Like, did he not have, like, maybe other options for you overseas and things like that, or had that conversation not even come up?
Yeah, we had chatted about overseas. My first goal was to play in the NWSL, so we had just approached it as, let's go through the draft, and then if nothing comes from the draft, then we'll start looking at overseas options, because the window doesn't close until March, I think. And so that was, at that point, it was December. So had the NWSL draft not worked out, we would have had January, February, and then part of March to figure out an overseas kind of plan and where we were going to go from there. So we had like a contingency plan, but we didn't have anything set in stone. Yeah,
okay. Fascinating. And at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but Washington Spirit had just won the NWSL, hadn't they?
Yeah, they were coming off the championship.
Like the team that were coming like rock bottom. You were going into the champions.
Yeah. Yes. Very intimidating.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was going to be my next question. How did that feel, stepping into that sort of environment? Like, you know, you've gone from, you know, a strong Division 1 team, but let's be real, you know, you hadn't won national championships and things like that, so all of a sudden, you know, really getting thrown in the deep end. Yeah,
it was nuts. I think just the quality of players they had there, and they still have, but like that year specifically, and just walking into the locker room and you're now teammates with your idols that you've watched growing up, and you're like, oh wow, that's crazy. But you like can't make it a big deal because it's just another day at the office. They're just people, and like you get to learn from them. But it was definitely kind of had like a starstruck moment my first day. I was like, holy crap, we are here and we are doing this thing. This is nuts. And I think it's something too, like, I mean, you dream about from when you're little, but then you actually get there and you're like, Is this real? Did I,
Yeah.
am I in the same room? This is crazy.
Oh, that's brilliant. What would you say, like, how big is the jump from obviously top end Division 1 to NWSL? Is it like a really big step up in your opinion?
For me, it was massive.
Was it?
I'm not sure how other people feel, but for me, it was huge. Just the awareness and the IQ and this, again, the speed of play. I feel like every level you go to, the speed of play is so much faster. But then, like, the soccer smarts and the awareness that these players had was next level. And also the accountability that they had and the expectations they had for you. Even though I was a rookie coming in and was brand new, like, they still held me to the same standard that they held each other, which I thought was really amazing. But they were really encouraging with it too. Like, they weren't mean if you made a mistake. They picked you back up, but if you were playing next to them, like, you were expected to do your job and to do your job well, and they helped you do that, which was really cool.
No, that's awesome. Awesome, great experience. Talk to me. What's this? And again, I know you and I have spoken about this previously, but for those of us who don't know, here in Australia, you were a national team replacement. Can you elaborate on that? What did that mean? What does that role look like?
Yeah, so I guess like a quick backstory. Got drafted in 2022, I think it was. Went into preseason, second day of preseason, tore my ACL. So I had a season-ending injury for all of the 2022 season. Went home, did all my rehab, came back in with the Spirit for 2023. And then 2023, I was essentially a non-roster invitee. So I ended up being a train-on with them from January until June, I want to say. And then when June rolled around was the time the World Cup was starting. So national team replacement contracts come up anytime there are big national or like international tournaments. So World Cup, Olympics, not really the Gold Cup, but you could technically sign a replacement player contract if someone was gone for a long time or someone came back injured. So you basically come in and you sign a short-term contract with the team. So I was on with the Spirit for all of the World Cup while the national team players were gone. And it's the teams have the option to sign you at the end of that. If they have the roster space, they have the option to let you go. So you'll see a lot of people who are train-ons with the teams throughout the year sign national team replacement contracts at that point, or you'll see a lot of people who are playing overseas that are from America and they have a break in their season and they come in and they play a couple months in the NWSL and then go back.
Right, okay. Interesting. Can we rewind a second? You mentioned pre-season ACL injury. I presume that's as soon as you've signed for Spirit, correct?
That was the crazy thing. So when you get drafted, which a lot of people don't know this, and this was, again, at the time, this was how it was. The rules have changed a little bit. When you get drafted, you're not signed immediately. So they have your rights as a player, but you still have, unless you're like a top 10 pick, I think is when if you're first round, your contract is guaranteed from what I understand, but outside of the first round, it's not. And so you still have to go into training camp and basically do a tryout. And if at the end of the training camp they like you or they see you fitting in throughout training camp, then they'll offer you a contract. So because it was the second day, I was not on contract when I tore my ACL. So that was a super interesting experience. Because of that, the team was not obligated to help me with my recovery. And I ended up having to go home and do all my rehab on my own. I used their team surgeon, which he was great, love him. But yeah, I ended up doing all of my rehab on my own. I did part of it back at Gonzaga and then did the last half of it in Los Angeles. And yeah, but because they had my rights, they either had to release my rights for me to go to another team or I had to go back in and play with them and then get my rights released. So that was like a super interesting kind of little caveat with the draft. Yeah. So it was an interesting experience.
Sounds confusing, to be honest.
Yeah, it is pretty confusing. And there's a CBA in place now, so I don't know the nitty-gritty of playing rights and how that works anymore. But at the time, if you were drafted, they held your playing rights for 2 or 3 years, I think. Unless unless they decided to waive your rights. So it worked out great for me because they held onto my rights and I was able to go back into preseason. But because I wasn't on contract, all of the rehab, all of the surgery, everything came out of my own pocket, and I didn't really have a lot of guidance from them. They're under new ownership now, though, so I don't think that situation would be handled this way. If it were to happen to someone again, I think I just kind of got a little bit unlucky with the timing of stuff. So yeah, that was an interesting experience, but they were absolutely incredible once I went back, and under the new ownership and the new staff, they were unbelievable. And I feel super, super grateful that they brought me back in and helped me with the last part of my rehab and got me back into playing. And without them, I wouldn't be here.
Oh, that's really good of you, right? Like, it's good that you can look at it from that perspective, and fair play to them under the new ownership. When you came back, they helped you recover and got you back on the field. In my opinion, though, I think the first half of that story sucks and doesn't sound very fair. Am I correct in saying that? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a tough pill to swallow. I think you do sign a lot of papers that say, hey, we're not obligated to help you. You're coming in as a tryout. If you're not on contract and you get injured, it's on you.
This doesn't make it.
I don't personally agree with it. And again, the new ownership they had no idea that that's what happened to me, and they were horrified that was how the situation was handled. But that is the unfortunate part of playing the sport, and the unfortunate part of organization sometimes is that happens. But it was great. I got the chance to go home for the first time in forever and to spend a lot of time with my family and my friends. So for that, I am really grateful, even though it was a kind of crappy situation.
Yeah, for sure. Fair play for having such a positive outlook on it. But then Israel pops up. Where did that come from? That was a bit left field, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was.
I don't even want to try and pronounce the club's name because I'll probably.
Papua Renana.
There you go.
Yeah. So as the NTR National Team Replacement contract was coming to an end, kind of had a conversation with the coaches and the GM and was like, hey, these are my goals as a player. And they were like, we love that. You're not going to get playing time here, and you're at the point where you need to go get playing time. So you should go abroad. And I was like, okay, awesome. Transfer window was very close to closing. I think there's maybe 3 weeks left in it. So a lot of teams had already signed international players. I really wanted to come to Australia at the time, but not a lot of teams had the money or the space for an international player. And that was kind of the same around other leagues I had looked at. And then Israel popped up. They had the money and the space for an international player. And it was a place I knew I could go in and that I was going to be able to start. And so I was going to get the experience that was super important for my development.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how that happened. It happened probably within a week of getting the opportunity and signing the papers, packing my stuff up in DC and going home. And then I was home for a week, and then I went over to Israel. Yeah,
wow. And what was it like there? I know you're only there for a short period of time.
Yeah, I was there for 3.5 weeks, very short. It was a lot different. Did you play
a game, or?
I played 2 games.
2 games, okay.
2 games. Scored my first professional goal there, so that was exciting.
Hey, well done.
Yeah, met some really cool people. But yeah, it was cool. Definitely different, very different country to America. So that was something that was really cool for me to experience, just being in a new culture, being so far from home. And the team was really young. I want to say our average age was 17. So in America, obviously, when you're playing at the pro level, I think the average age is usually like 25, 26. So that was a bit of a learning curve to play with people that were still in high school. I think we had some girls that were as young as 16 on the team. And that was kind of my first experience playing with really young players at a professional level. So yeah, it was just really different in the resources that they had available. Washington Spirit, I mean, they probably are one of the most professionally well-run clubs in the world, I would say. And the resources that they have at their fingertips are absolutely incredible. And that's because of Michelle Kang, the ownership, and the money she's put into it. And so going from the top of the top to having a field where we shared a locker room with the entire club was so different.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was good. I mean, wouldn't change that I went there. I learned a bit, wasn't there for a long time, made some new friends, got to see a new country, and kind of like got a new perspective on soccer as well. Because I think when you're in a place that maybe doesn't have the resources you're used to. It's not the level you were either used to or expecting. You really get to decide if soccer is something that you really want to do, and if you love it for soccer or if you love it for all the shiny things you get on the side with it. And so that was a really good experience for me to learn that and kind of have those conversations with myself.
Awesome. It's mad where football can take you, right?
So crazy. Yeah. Such a small world in the football world as well.
And then not long after, Australia. Like, how did all that come about?
Yeah, came home from Israel, thought I was going to be home until the January transfer window. And within probably a week of being home, my agent called and was like, hey, there's an opportunity in Australia. I don't want to pursue it until I know that you're on board. And I had no idea what club it was for, knew nothing. I was like, yep, sign me up. Let's go. So, yeah, she reached out and ended up learning it was from Sydney. Unfortunately, it was because Nat Tobin had torn her ACL, which I wish that had never happened, and you never want to see a player get injured. But it ended up being a really great opportunity for me. Again, wish that wasn't the case and those weren't the circumstances I came in on. But that's kind of how that happened. Ended up being home for maybe 3 weeks and then ended up in Australia end of November.
Yeah. Wow. And how have you found the A-League so far?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, there's such good talent in the A-League, I think, from veteran players all the way down to like up and coming players that are going to be massive names in the next, I'd say, probably 3-4 years. So it's really fun. I think it fits my style of play a lot. It's very physical and that just like you're challenged every game and every practice. I think there's just, I didn't know a ton about the A-League. I knew about the A-League and I had specifically known about Sydney FC because a couple of my friends from Spirit had played for them and were like, you've got to go play there if you ever have the chance.
Yeah, wow.
But outside of that little information, I wasn't sure what to expect.
Yeah.
And I've just been like absolutely floored with the talent in the league. It's been really fun.
Yeah, awesome. Where would you say, and feel free to be brutally honest, where do we sit if you compare the A-League to the NWSL?
I mean, I still think the NWSL is up here.
Yeah.
I think the A-League is on the right track. I think the biggest thing is the A-League has to go full-time for it to compete with the NWSL. And yeah, obviously you see like A-League players getting called into the NWSL, getting transferred to the NWSL every single year, and they are super successful and go in and start giving good contributing minutes. But I just think the time and resources that are available in the NWSL allow players to probably develop a little bit more. And I would say like the technical ability of players in the NWSL is probably a bit higher. But again, that comes with age, right? Like the A-League age is quite young, where the NWSL is 25, 26, 25 to 28 is your average age, where here I think your average age is maybe like 20 to 23. So even just those couple years make a big difference. But yeah, I do think it's moving in the right direction. I think that the biggest step that they need to take going forward, though, is going full-time.
Yeah.
Because I think that'll also keep like local homegrown talent players staying in Australia and in the A-League, but then it'll also encourage more international players to come as well.
Yeah.
Just when you do have the more stability of a full-time contract.
I think you hit the nail on the head with your comment before, and I saw it when I was in America. Time, money, resources. There's a lot more of that in abundance in the States, whether, in my opinion, even looking at grassroots, all the way through to college, to the professional game. I think the Americans get around sport a little bit better than we do in this country. And that's just my brutally honest opinion. Some people might disagree with me, but I think you're right. If the full-time program needs to happen, if the league's going to really take off, I do think having the World Cup here was massive, right? So many people got around it. The crowds were enormous. There was such a big buzz. The pubs were full when the Tillies were on. It was a really special moment. Do you think the World Cup has really elevated the game as well as it could have, or do you think we've still got a fair way to go?
I mean, I think both. I think you can see it in the attendance numbers at our games specifically. I mean, our semifinal game, we had over 7,000 people there, which is
Huge.
insane. I think every game we had over 2,000 or 3,000 people, which is amazing. And I don't know if that was happening before. I think they were getting good numbers, but I don't think they were getting those high of numbers that consistently prior to the World Cup. I think it also has gotten people talking about women's soccer, which is the first thing. Like you need people to talk about it, you need people to talk about it so that people are interested in it, so that people can invest in it. You can't just have, you can't have no motion, no noise around it. So I think that's been huge for it as well. But I still think there are definitely steps to take. And I think carrying the momentum of the World Cup will be really important over the next few years. Obviously, we have the Olympics now. And the Matildas are going for the Olympics, which will be really good, and that will carry the buzz. But then what's going to carry the buzz when there's not the Olympics and not the World Cup in those 2 years? So I think making sure that it's still on the rise after those are happening is going to be super important for the progress of the A-League. And not even just the A-League, but just all of soccer in Australia.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I mean, look, you know, it's always good when you can get around a team that's doing well, right? You know, the Matildas are doing well, you know, on the national stage. You know, I see it in my line of work. You know, it's when college coaches are reaching out to us, you know, on the female side, it's, right, we produce some really good players in this country. You know, they're really taking note. That's not to say that, you know, the men's coaches aren't taking note of our players. They are, but you know, if you look at it from the men's perspective and you're a college coach, you're like, okay, cool, can I go and be picking up, you know, top lads that have dropped out of academies in Europe versus Australia? But, you know, on the women's side, it's like, oh, well, hang on, look at how well the national team are doing. You know, the league's getting better. It's, you know, we're producing some really good female players here. It's just... It's been an interesting journey for Australian football, and in particular women's football in this country.
Yeah.
So here's a question: what are you doing next season? Are you hanging around, or are you
have not gotten that far. I'm just tunnel vision on the grand final right now.
Yeah, that
is what I'm focused on.
The next question: what's the mood like leading into the final?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're super excited. Obviously, Sydney has a massive, long, incredible history of making it to grand finals, and to be able to continue that this year, especially after dropping the premiership, is a really big deal and super exciting. And this is my first grand final, my first championship of any sort in a professional league. So I think that's cool, and it's something that not very many players get to experience during their professional career. So I'm really excited. And yeah, I think it's just a good vibe, just another week of playing soccer with your best friends and enjoying it, and knowing that we get to play for something so big is really cool.
No, that's awesome. Well, look, that's all from us, and you know, all I can say is thank you. You know, I've really appreciated all your answers. You know, you've gone in depth, and you know, I still love the story about the draft, man. You took me on a roller coaster there. That was awesome, and just everything that you've gone through, and you know, I think you're doing great things with your career, and you know, let's hope that come the grand final, there's a nice bit of silverware to show for it.
Fingers crossed. We're going to do our best.
All good. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate it, and you know, best of luck in the future.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to listen to the episode and to hear more about all your guys' recruiting and your success with sending players to the States.
Thank you, and hopefully I can grab your coach's number and we can have a few more Zags that are maybe Australians.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.